Hello, welcome back to the Freckled Cottage. If you're new here, welcome new friend. My name is Cherie and I'm the owner and creator here. Space has opened up in my booth, so I was on the hunt for a larger piece of furniture to fill it up. I found this solid Queen Anne chest of drawers in very good shape for $30 at a local thrift store called the Shalom Shop. Within a day or two, I had a vision and I was off to the races. First things first, I did remove the hardware and cleaned it up real well using Dixie Belle's White Lightning Cleaner. For the base coat, I chose to mix some paint. I didn't take notes, but it's generally a mix of DIY cottage colors in the color Crockery, as well as some DIY weathered wood and home decor black chalk paint. I chose the Crockery for the purpose that it has a built-in sealer. Weathered wood wasn't able to darken it enough, so that's why I pulled out the black chalk paint, which caused it to pull a little bit blue, which wasn't what I was going for exactly, but for a base coat, it worked out just fine. I was just trying to prevent the original red finish to show through too much when distressed. The coverage was awesome and it barely needed 2 full coats to cover. Also, I was trying to add in some texture, so I used some stippling motions on the second coat. In an attempt to darken up the base coat some more, as well as beef up some of the sealer properties, I created a glaze of sorts with some darker paint and DIY's Big Top. It didn't do much for the color, but it made me feel better about the strength of the base coat since I had diluted the sealer a bit in the cottage color. Also, I was after a chippy finish, so a barrier between the chalky absorbent paint and the milk paint that I had decided to use for the next step was very necessary. Milk paint will not chip or crackle at all if the surface soaks it right up. I thought a layer of Big Top would be just the resist it needed to create the look I was after. Like I said, I was after a chippy finish that would show some of this color, and I thought the dark blue-gray would look very nice underneath the milk paint color that I had decided on. I used sweet Pickins milk paint in the color Sweetie Jane and Proper. And yes, you guessed it, I mixed them up. Hey, it's just what I do. This was a mixture of 3 parts Sweetie Jane to 1 part Proper. Sweetie Jane just seemed a little too bright for my taste, and the Proper brought it down just a notch, and I was very happy with the result. So when mixing milk paint, it's a 1-to-1 ratio of paint powder to warm water. As you can see here, I attempted to use a little milk frother to get a smooth mix, but really it didn't work well at all. It just wasn't powerful enough. I've since ordered a cheap immersion blender for just this purpose, but at the time of this filming, I didn't have it yet. Be sure to let the mixture set for 5 to 10 minutes before beginning to paint. It will thicken up a bit and you can adjust the water level by a drop or 2 if needed. For this project, I used my Klingon F40 brush and was assisted by a mister bottle, and I gave this piece 2 layers of the milk paint, letting it dry in between coats. Friends, it's my goal to become a Sweet Pickins milk paint retailer, and in order to do that, I've got to raise the initial investment to stock my booth and upcoming website. Any super thanks funds received on my videos will go straight to the Sweet Pickins milk paint buy-in savings pot. In advance, I want to thank anyone who donates. I can't wait to become your milk paint retailer. Once the second coat was applied, I got out the heat gun, which is another great way to encourage chippiness in milk paint finishes. The speed in which the milk paint dries also plays a big part in how much it will chip, or not. You can see here the crackle happening right before your eyes on top of this chest of drawers. Once it was dry, it was time to sand. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of me doing that. I used my orbital sander to start, but even at a pretty fine grit, it was too powerful. So for the most part, I hand sanded, especially the details. Just sanding didn't create quite enough of the chippiness that I was after. So next I decided to wet distress. This is another great way to encourage the paint to release a bit. When it's dampened, it distresses in the most lovely and natural looking way. After, let it dry again and you'll notice even more chipping. So, just a hint, if you're already happy with the texture, I wouldn't recommend wet distressing. Again, I don't have footage of it, but after wet distressing, it needed another round of fine grit sanding. I used a sanding block and a 400 grit to ensure it was as smooth and soft as possible. A word of caution, be sure that your surface is completely free of any sanding dust and particles before moving on to the next step. The next step was applying the transfer, and I chose IOD's Elysium. I'd been saving it for just the right piece, and this was it. I haven't done a full 4-sheet single design transfer application before, so I was a little nervous to get started. First, I measured the piece and found the center. I will tell you, the first quadrant was the easiest. There was no needing to match it up with the next piece, and all I had to worry about was getting the bottom right corner in the center and contending with the ridges and detail on the drawers. If you're new to applying large transfers to furniture, I'd recommend starting with a piece that does not have these features, as it really elevated the difficulty level. I used some painter's tape to hold the sheet in place and began at the top by pulling the backing sheet down a little at a time. This was the most crucial part. You don't want the transfer to stick to the surface until you're ready, and it's in the exact right spot. Those ridges were pretty challenging to work with. Before pressing the transfer down on the flat surface, you can see that I'm using the transfer tool to press it deeply into the ridges, and only then folding the transfer down onto the flat surface. You'll notice here that the transfer is pulling up some chipping paint. Don't worry, that's totally okay. It only lends to the distressed and chippy aesthetic that I'm after. Once the transfer was applied, I used an X-Acto knife to cut the transfer between the drawer crevices and then used the transfer tool and my fingertips to ensure it was adhered to the surface before doing any burnishing. If you burnish too soon, you run the risk of ripping up a piece of the transfer. For the second sheet of the transfer, I used a very sharp scissor to fussy cut around the design that needed to puzzle into the previous sheet. Then, once I had it taped in the right spot, I began transferring at the bottom by cutting off the bottom part of the backing. I felt like starting this one at the bottom was necessary because it needed to line up with the center perfectly. I will say that this was the most challenging of all 4 of the sheets. I made a pretty big boo-boo and learned that doing a large multi-piece transfer like this on a piece of furniture with lots of detail ridges should not be done right side up. Take it from me, lay your piece of furniture down on its back. Don't do it like this. You may not get as lucky as I did that it came out well in the end. Spoiler alert. Because the surface was vertical, and because of all the drawer ridges, and because I only have 2 hands, I wasn't able to continue moving upward, so I decided to take it from the top. You guys, why did I think that this center backing piece would just slide right out of there? Ready for it? Here's where I got really, really lucky. Like, luckier than I've ever luckied before. So later that day, my husband came home from work and helped me lay her down, and let me tell you, it was infinitely easier to transfer perfectly that way. I'll let you enjoy the rest of this transfer process to the music. The next day I began the process of sealing it all up with wax, and I used DIY's Wax and Clear. I applied 2 coats of wax to the entire piece and 3 on the top. Each layer should be wax on. Let it sit for not more than an hour, 30 minutes is usually good, depending on the conditions, then wipe away the excess with a lint-free cloth. Once the final coat of wax has been wiped back, it's time to buff. I like it shiny, so a little elbow grease is called for. I didn't get footage of this, but it's well worth it to protect your finish. I found these pulls on Amazon for a good price, but I had to make a few trips to the hardware store to obtain just the right length of screws and washers, but I think they complement the piece really well. This lovely chest of drawers is available for sale in my booth at the Rustic Rooster Market in Princeton, Minnesota. If you're not local, feel free to email me or DM me on Instagram for pricing and shipping information. Isn't she just gorgeous? Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you have like-minded friends, be sure to share it out. Check out previous content and also subscribe and comment to support my new channel. Oh, and turn on notifications to ensure you're notified every time a new video is uploaded. Find time to create, and see you next time.